Got a 99 Honda Accord EX V6 here. Needs a new drive axle on the passenger side, or the right side, and we're going to go ahead and fix it. The drive axle, also called a CV axle. So come along, I'll show you how I knock it out. Alright, we're going to lift the car up in the air. So I have the emergency brake on, which locks these back wheels, and then I have the wheels chalked like that. We don't want this car going anywhere. And coming from under the front of the vehicle here, we'll just go straight down and under. And if I can get there, this piece right here with the hole right there in the middle, that's your jack point. We're going to put the jack right there and we're going to jack up the front of the car. And right here, behind the front wheels on each side, right there, this bracket right there is where we're going to put the jack stand on each side. One on this side, one on the other side. Alright, we'll go ahead and break these lug nuts loose. I'm using an impact wrench. If you don't have one of these, you're going to have to break them loose with the vehicle still touching the ground. And you can see there's a shot of why we're replacing this CV axle. This boot has been opened up for quite a while. You can see all the grease everywhere. So it's not worth putting a new boot on. CV axles are so cheap, it's just easier to put a new axle on. Alright, we're going to need to get this spindle nut off. And you're going to need a 36mm socket for that. If you don't have an impact wrench, which I do, you'll probably want to pop this center cap out. You can just knock it from underneath, pop it out, put the wheel back on and bolt it on, and then lower the vehicle so it's touching the ground, and then use a long breaker bar and break it loose. And as you can see, they're staked down. We're replacing this axle, so I'm not worried about it. If we weren't replacing it, we would have to unstake that, so you got to stick something in there, pry this back a little bit so that you don't damage the threads. But we're replacing it all, so I don't care about it. Alright, I'm going to use this axle nut set by Gear Wrench, part number 41650. And here's the 36mm. You can see it just goes right on there like that. That's how I'm going to knock it loose. You can see they're on there tight. And you can see, even spin it off like that, these threads aren't damaged. We can spin that on, no problem. Now's a good time. Make sure our axle moves back in there, and you can see it did. Make sure it's not rusted inside the hub there. As you can see on this vehicle, the transmission's way over on the other side. So, I don't know if I can get a shot of it, but I'll try. But the CV axle ends right there, and then there's an intermediate drive shaft right there that goes right there. And so we don't need to drain the transmission on this one, on this side. If we're doing the other side, because the transmission's right there, probably going to lose some fluid, and it's probably not a bad idea to drain the transmission and then just refill it when you're done. Alright, underneath this gooey mess, there should be a cotter pin, if I can find it, and a nut. There it is. So we'll get that cotter pin off, and we'll get this nut off here. Hopefully you can see that. Trying to film and do it with one hand, kind of hard. Just get the cotter pin out. Now we'll get this castle nut off. Alright, we'll just spin this 17mm off. And we got to loosen this ball joint, and normally you can just hit it right here and it'll separate it. And I like to put the nut back on. That way when we're hitting it, if we hit anything, we'll hit the nut. We won't hit the stud and damage the threads. So we'll just smack on that a couple times and see if we can't get this to loosen up. Alright, safety glasses. Now you see, we just hit it there a few times. Now you can see it's loose now. And I was hitting it with this one, and it wasn't quite big enough. Usually I get them loose with that, but she was on there pretty darn tight, so I had to move up to the big boy. Alright, I took some rags, cleaned all this area up a little bit. Now, we got to take this lower fork bolt out. Now we'll hold it with a 17mm wrench, like this on this side, and then we'll go at it from the other side with a 17mm socket, and we'll bust this thing loose and take it off. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a pain to get out because there's some pressure from this lower control arm. I'm also going to loosen up this 14mm bolt right there. Get it out of our way. That way that fork is out of our way, nice and loose. Won't be an issue now. And I'm just going to maneuver this back a little bit. Bring it. We'll bring it back like that over the drive axle, and we'll take it out. And we'll just set it exactly how it goes in there, and then I'll clean up this nasty mess. That's part of the reason why I'm going to get it out of there. It's just a nasty gooey mess. All this is, we'll have to wipe it all up. Alright, we know our axle's loose. We can push that in. We've already pushed it in part way. We need to get it separated from right here. So all we got to do is kind of lift up on this whole assembly, pop it up off the joint there. Just like that. Now we can lift it up and pull it out a little bit and get the shaft out. Come on. Alright, what I'm going to do is take this pry bar and we're going to go up in here. If I can get you a shot. Let's see. We just need to pry this joint apart. Oh, my light is not going to cooperate. Alright, we're just going to put it right there and just pop it apart. Just like that. That's all we need to do. Now it's out. Now we'll just reach in, grab our axle. As you can see, we got a brand new axle here. Comes with a new nut. and it's a good idea. Match up your old and your new parts. Make sure everything looks the same. Make sure the splines look the same on both ends. Make sure if yours has a ringtone for the ABS, make sure you got one. Most of them come with that nowadays. Just make sure it looks the same. And I'm going to take some brake clean. I'm going to clean up all the, especially the brake hoses and everything where the grease got on them, and clean it up as much as I can, and we'll get this new one in. And because this one's going into an intermediate shaft, Honda recommends putting a little bit of grease right there. So I have just a little bit. Don't put too much because it can create pockets of air in there. And on this side, I put just a little bit of fluid film, just on the splines right here, not on the threads, but on the splines. Because as you can see, this one's rusted. So to save the next guy who has to pull this axle out from a lot of grief, we'll put just a little bit of fluid film on there. And you can see right there where the drive axle is going to go back in. And so we'll just clean that area off real quick, and then we'll just slide our axle and pop it right back into place. Slide it into place, and then usually you can just tap it into place and you can hear it lock in. Now we know it's locked. It's a good idea to go under here and look at it, push on a little bit, make sure that it's locked in. And because this one has an intermediate shaft, we weren't so worried about the seal. But on the other side, where there is no intermediate shaft and it's going directly into the transmission, we want to be careful about that transmission seal, that we don't damage it pulling it out and putting it back in. Otherwise you're going to create a transmission leak. So as you saw, I just manhandled it and got the axle back through here, and then I got it set back on our ball joint. So now it's in position. Now we'll just set the fork back in place. And when you're manhandling it, take a look back in there, make sure you didn't pull that joint out. We'll set this fork back in place. There we go. All right, we'll get this lower bolt in. Just remember, these bolts always on Hondas, on these lower fork bolts, go from front towards the back. So the nut's just going to go on the back side. And so we just need to push up on this, maneuver it a little bit, get it in just like that. Alright, we'll just go ahead and put the nut on. And then you see there's a rubber bushing right there. What we're going to do is we're going to put the jack right here and jack this thing up until it just comes off the jack, so that way the weight of the vehicle is on this lower fork here, and then we're going to tighten these down to the final torque. That way we don't twist up this bushing because there's no force on it right now. And let's put this castle nut back on. Alright, we're just going to tack this down. And while we're thinking of it, we'll just put this axle nut on. And I got the torque turned down on this. We'll just bring it in. Alright, while we're here, we'll go ahead and torque this castle nut to 36 foot-pounds. It's 36 to 43, but we'll start with 36, and if we have to tighten a little more to get the cotter pin through, we will. Yeah, 36.1, close. And with the new cotter pin, we'll just go see if we can match one of these holes. And perfect. And that's how Honda recommends they be installed, just like that. If it's slightly too long, you can always snip it to make it fit. Alright, you can see what I did here. I put the jack and I put it right next to the bolt. I'm not touching that bolt. I put it right here. And I took the load off the car. So now the weight of the vehicle, at least this side of the suspension, is now on the jack. So that way this bushing is under tension. Now we can tighten this. This one we'll torque it down to, I believe the spec is 47, and then the top bolt is 32. And there's a little tab on the back of this fork right back here. You got to make sure the tab is on the strut. Make sure this fork is inside that tab, otherwise this fork won't go on right. Yeah, see that tab right on the back of the strut? You got to get that lined up. Alright, the spec is 32. We'll get it torqued to 32 with the weight on it. Not a lot of room in there. Alright, we'll get the bottom one torqued to 47. Now we can let the weight off. Alright, using the big torque wrench, we're going to torque this down properly to 181 foot-pounds. In order to keep it from moving, we're going to put a screwdriver in there. And there we go. And we'll just go ahead and stake this down. And you can see, just stake it down right there. And I like to use, a bit that's dulled down. I've dulled mine down so it doesn't crack. So it doesn't crack that, because if it cracks that, then you got to replace the nut. make sure to get all your greasy paw prints off your rotor there. And I always take a second, touch all the bolts, make sure we got everything. We didn't forget a cotter pin. And we'll lower the vehicle down so it's on the ground. We'll torque those to 80 foot-pounds. Just 80 foot-pounds, that's pretty much the standard for Hondas. Well, there you go. That's how I do the drive axles, or otherwise known as CV axles, on these older Honda Accord V6s. If the CV boot is busted open like that, you're going to have grease everywhere. It makes a mess. You're going to probably need a lot of rags and maybe a little brake cleaner and probably quite a few gloves. I know I ran through quite a bit of all that. So just be prepared for that mess if your CV boots are broken open. And as always, if this video helped you out or you liked it, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.